Maggie, take it away.
Thanks so much, Elsie, for that introduction. So as mentioned, my name is Maggie, Keela's customer training specialist. I've likely crossed paths with some of you before, so now you have a face to a name. So today we're going to dive into our end of year guide. So this covers best practices related to nonprofits' end of year tasks. And of course, we're going to show you how you can utilize Keela to support you in accomplishing these tasks. All right, so let's get started. In this webinar, we're going to explore how to prepare for last minute donations, making sure you've entered and cleaned up your existing data, preparing and generating receipts and letters, sending out end of year summaries, and we'll look over some annual reporting tools as well. So we'll work through best practices within each of these topics, and then we'll show you how to use Keela so you can speed up and streamline these processes. Okay, so let me just make sure here. Elsie, are you able to see my screen?
Oh, no, it's not coming through.
Okay, let me try this again here.
The old share the screen. There you go. Oh, that was quick.
There
Normally
we go.
it takes me a lot more fumbling. Brilliant.
You think we've done this enough times, but technology.
I'm never going to be ready. Okay. Beautiful.
Okay, so here's our agenda in its real form. Okay, so first things first are those last minute gifts. So before the end of the year closes out, you'll want to make sure you're prepared for last minute givers. And just as a fun fact, did you know that nearly 1/3 or 31% of annual giving occurs in December? So what does this mean for you? It means that you'll want to make sure that your donation page and Keela form are up and running. It's never a bad idea to jump into your form designer and make sure you're adhering to best practices for your donation form. So some of these best practices include allowing for multiple giving options, so maybe one-time and recurring, letting people know where the donation is going by communicating the impact it will have, including a compelling image to catch the eye, keeping the form simple rather than cluttered with too much text or images, and staying on brand by using your organization's colors or logo. So many of you might already be adhering to these best practices, but it's never a bad time to review your form design to see if there are any strategic changes you can make. And if you want to take end of year giving a step further, you can consider the following ideas. You can consider following up on pledges. So as a reminder, pledges are when someone promises to give. For example, a donor might say, I'll give $1,000 by the end of the year. So if you've logged your pledges in Keela or you plan to, you can filter donors with overdue pledges. This would be a great time to reach out to them, encouraging them to meet their pledge goal. They may just need a reminder, or perhaps they need to update their pledged amount. I'll jump into Keela really quickly to show you how you can do this. Okay, so in this case, I'd want to go to contacts. I'd want to use my filters tool. Okay, and I'd want to edit my filter. And I'm filtering out contacts based on pledge information. Okay, so I'd want to use my pledges filter. More specifically, the status of the pledge contains any of, as the logic, overdue. So what this is going to do is filter out all my contacts with an overdue pledge. So if I press filter, I can see I have one contact in this account that has an overdue pledge. If I want to find out more details, I can click on Daffy Duck's profile, head to fundraising tab, go right into pledges, and then I can see that Daffy Duck has an outstanding amount of $1,000 that they promised to give by September 1st. So in that case, maybe I want to send a direct email to Daffy right from here, letting them know that their pledge is overdue. All right, so jumping back, you can also consider launching an end of year campaign to reach your annual funding goal. So you can really excite your donors with the idea that you're so close to meeting your end of year funding goal and tell them why that funding is so important for your organization and meeting your impact for the year. For this one, you may want to add a progress bar to your form so your donors are encouraged by the visual. So we can take a look at an example of this as well. So if we jump into forms, let's say I have an end of year fundraiser, and maybe my form looks a little bit like this. So I have an image as a donor. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm saving the turtles one sandy dollar at a time. I know exactly how I'm supporting the organization, as in I'm helping them meet their annual impact goal. And I can see exactly where my donation is going, right? What exactly is that goal? And then here you have the visual of, okay, I can see this organization is aiming for 10,000. They're a couple thousand away from their goal. So maybe I'm going to help them get that green bar up. All right, so that might be an example. Okay, and lastly, you can consider launching a holiday campaign. This is to wish your contacts and donors a happy holidays. Maybe you want to throw in a call to action in your email to encourage those who are feeling generous this holiday. Or maybe you just want to say happy holidays without a call to action, which is absolutely fine, as it's still a way of building a relationship with your donors. So your holiday email might look something like this as an example. So if we look at the content, it's just a little e-card, 'tis the season of giving. I know exactly where my donation is going as a donor, and it's a quick call to action. So it's not too complicated to read, and you can send greetings to your donors or potential donors. Okay, so moving forward, now that you're prepared for last minute donors, it's time to make sure that you've entered all your data from the year and that your contact data is cleaned up and ready for receding. So let's first talk about what kind of data you want to make sure is entered into Keela. Start by making sure all of your donation data is recorded in Keela. So take the time to think about all the platforms or sources external to Keela where donations have been submitted or processed. Maybe it was through Facebook, in person, an event, via check, directly to your payment processor. Any and all of these donations that occurred outside of Keela that have not been entered into the system, you'll want to make sure you import into Keela. This way you make sure every contributor gets a receipt for their donation and your reporting is up to date. You'll also want to make sure your revenue data for the year is entered into Keela. Did you sell any event tickets or products? You'll want to make sure all of your revenues or those non-tax deductible transactions are entered into the system. This way you can ensure that every last penny that contributed to your organization's income is accounted for in your end of year reporting. Lastly, if you have volunteers that support your organization, you might want to consider adding their activities into Keela if you haven't already. This way you can report on the number of volunteer hours, see who your hardest working volunteers are, and even generate lists of your volunteers to thank them at the end of the year. As a volunteer, I can say I've always appreciated when organizations have done that. You can import your volunteer activity directly into Keela in bulk to make this process super quick and easy. You also want to make sure that you have up-to-date contact information for your contacts and that you don't have any duplicate contacts. A few tips for data cleanup are: 1, make sure you have complete and updated mailing addresses for your donors. You can use Keela's filters to filter out contacts without an address in the system. You can either look for their address on something like White Pages, or you could create a custom form for collecting contact information, and then you could send that form to those contacts via email. So this is really important as addresses are required for donation receipts. You might also want to consider using Keela's in-app merge duplicates tool to make sure you merge any contacts who have 2 records in the system. So let's take a look at how we can accommodate these best practices in Keela. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go to contacts. I'm going to use filters from the contacts tool, but you could also create a segment, okay, which will create a list. It'll make it really easy to send out an e-blast to these contacts if that's what you want to do. All right. In either case, the filters are going to be the same in both tools. So I'm going to edit my filters, and I'm looking specifically for contacts based on contact information, more specifically address information. So there's 3 address filters that we're going to use. So the first one, address city, I'm looking for contacts where this field is empty, right? Now I want to make sure the other address fields are also empty. So if I just start typing in address, the filters will pop up. Okay, so is empty. And then we'll do the last one, country is empty. So it's pulling contacts where all of these fields are empty. So we'll go ahead and press filter. I can see that I have about 6 contacts that I don't have an address for. So maybe in this particular case, I can see that most of them have email addresses. So maybe it'll be helpful to send them an email. And you could send them a form to collect information, and maybe it looks something like this. Curious about what we're up to? Help us update you by providing your contact information. Or if they're donors, you could say, hey, we'd love to send you a donation receipt at the end of the year. We just need a bit more information for you. So the content of the form would really be based on your particular use case. Okay, and then we're going to look at merging duplicates in Keela. Okay, that was the second point about data cleanup. So if I go to my contacts tool, you'll notice we have this little merge tool here. And if I click on it, it's going to bring up any duplicates in the account. Now keep in mind, Keela looks for duplicates through the merge tool by looking at matching full names or matching email addresses. And those duplicates will show up here. You can pull any information from the secondary record into the primary or king record that you want to keep. So for example, I have 2 different birth dates here, but maybe I know this person's birthday is March 17th. So I would select it from the secondary record and it'll pull into the primary record. Then you just go ahead and click merge, or maybe a duplicate showed up, but for whatever reason you want them as separate contacts, you can always skip them. And this is going to take you through all the duplicates that Keela finds in the system. But for whatever case, let's say you see duplicates in the system, but they don't have the same full name or email address. So the merge tool doesn't quite catch it. You can always select those contacts that you want to merge together. The actions button will pop up and you can press merge contacts. So you can do that manually as well. Okay, so let's jump back. All right, so now that our data is entered into Keela, everything's cleaned up, we can start to think about sending out receipts and letters. So all of us here, most of which have experience in the nonprofit sector, know that receding can feel like a pretty daunting task. Figuring out who's been receipted and who might still need a receipt for some or all of their donations can feel super overwhelming. So fortunately, Keela recognized this and has made this process pretty easy. So let's walk through some of the steps you can take in Keela to make sure that all your receipts are sent out. So step 1, make sure your receipt details and letters are all up to date. I'll show you where you can view and edit these details in Keela. So if we jump into Keela, we'll want to go to Organization Settings. Okay, then we'll want to go to the Receipts and Emails tab. This is where all your receipts and letters are going to live. So we'll go through what each section includes. First one is the logo and header. This is pretty straightforward. This is the logo and header that's going to show up on receipts. So you'll want to make sure that's up to date. The receipt details section, this will show the receipt that goes out anytime a payment is made to your organization, whether it's a donation or revenue payment. So note that the fields on this receipt are going to change depending on the type of transaction, because tax deductible receipts, for example, need a bit more information than like a standard sales receipt that you would see with a revenue. So you can preview or edit these receipt details. And one thing I want to point out about receipts is that you can choose if you want to add the first page, like a first page of a letter to the receipt or not, or you just want the receipt sent out. So sometimes people miss this. That's why I wanted to touch on it today. So first things first, let's look at a preview. So here's our receipt. Right now I can see that in the receipt, there's letter content as the first page. So when this receipt is created as a PDF, there's going to be a letter, and then attached to it is going to be the receipt. Okay. But if I edit these receipt details, let's say I don't want a letter. Let's say I just want the receipt because we're really going to bulk up our email acknowledgement letters. So I just want the receipt attached. If you scroll down when you're edit your receipt details, you can turn off this option to include a letter content as the first page in your receipt. Okay, we turn that off and we preview, and there we go. It's gone, right? So keep that in mind if you're seeing a letter on your receipt and you want to make adjustments. Okay, so the next section is acknowledgement letters. So think of this as like the body of the email. I'll preview it so you can get a picture here. Think of this as the body of the email that's sent out when someone makes a payment or you create and send a receipt via email. So the PDF, the receipt details that we just went over, this is going to be a PDF of a receipt attached to this email body. Okay, so I'm going to pull up an example in case that sounds confusing when I explain it. So in this case, the donor would get an acknowledgement letter. Okay, and then you see how the PDF is attached down here as an attachment. So that's what you can expect to look like when it goes out. All right. But you'll also notice that there's a printed letter tab. So some organizations who prefer to like print and mail their receipts and letters rather than send an email like we just saw, have the option to create content for this letter, and they'll have the option to generate this letter when they generate a receipt on the transaction details page. So again, this is totally optional. This tends to be a little bit more relevant to those who tend to like mail receipts and letters. But of course, you can also download and email these letters if you want as well. So both of these are editable here. And you'll notice the other acknowledgement letters are just relevant to the different types of transactions in the system. We just looked at the donation was an example. So you can go through and preview and edit all of these to make sure they're meeting your preference. So I also want to note that Keela allows you to also turn on receipt and letter customization for campaigns and impact areas. So think if any of your transactions are associated with a particular campaign or impact area, and you want to have custom receipts and letters for those particular transactions that reflect the campaign or impact area, you are going to want to make sure that you're also updating those receipts and letter settings. Okay, so these settings they're nearly identical to the organization level receipts and letters that we're just looking at. So they'll be pretty easy to navigate. But as an example, let's say I go to my campaign and I go to my end of year campaign. What I can do is head to the receipts and letters tab where I have the option to turn customization on for this campaign. So any receipt issued for a transaction associated to this campaign will pull this information. It's completely optional. You definitely don't have to do it. If you don't turn this customization on, it's going to pull receipts and letters from your organization settings. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so we'll jump back. We're ready for step 2. And this is generate receipts and letters. So once your receipt and letter settings are up to date, you're ready to generate receipts and letters. So you have a few options for issuing and sending receipts in Keela. We're going to work through a few scenarios to help you determine which method makes the most sense for you. So before diving into receipting scenarios, I just want to provide like a quick recap on how receipts are created in Keela and how you can tell if a receipt has been created for a transaction or not. This will provide us with just a little bit of context before diving into your more specific receipting scenarios. So first things first, there are 3 general ways that receipts can be created in Keela. Again, we'll go into more detail about these methods in just a bit. But in general, receipts are created in the 3 following ways. They can be created when they're auto-generated when someone submits a payment through a form, meaning as soon as a payment is made through a form, a receipt is always created automatically and sent out. Secondly, receipts can be manually created from a contact's profile. And lastly, receipts can also be created using our bulk receding tool, which allows you to receipt transactions in bulk. Okay, so we'll see this in action in a moment. Now, if you want to check if a particular transaction has been receipted, you can go to the transaction profile and check the receipt's status. You'll either see draft, meaning the transaction was created but no receipt was generated, receipted, meaning a receipt has been created, delivered, meaning a receipt has been generated and sent out via email, ignored, meaning a user on the account told the system not to generate a receipt for this particular transaction, or canceled, meaning the transaction itself has been canceled. Now, if the transaction has been receipted, you'll see a link to the PDF of the receipt on the transactions profile. So let's take a look at an example. So I'm going to use Ellen in this account as an example. I'll go to Ellen's transactions. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at these 2 transactions. I can see this one from July 8th, a receipt has been issued. So let's take a look at what that profile looks like. I can see the status of the receipt is receipted, and I can see that a receipt has been generated here. Okay, it looks like this particular receipt was not sent via email, otherwise it would say delivered, right? So these are sort of the hints that you can look at. This particular transaction on August 3rd, if I jump in, I can see that the status of the receipt is in draft mode. Okay, and you'll also notice this big blue box that we didn't see before. This is encouraging us to create a receipt. So we can either make a payment, which means enter credit card information. We can create a receipt, or we can upload a receipt for whatever reason receipts were generated external to Keela. And then it would go ahead and update that status. So let's see what that looks like. We'll go ahead and create a receipt. It's going to ask us for the full name. In this particular case, we'd probably need a last name for Ellen just because it's required. I can see Ellen has an address, so that's good. Then I get a delivery option. Do I want to send this receipt via email, or do I intend to print and mail this receipt? So I'm going to print and mail this particular receipt. And look what happens. It says, do you want to generate a PDF acknowledgement letter for printing as well? So remember when we were in the receipts and email settings and we were looking at that printed letter tab and acknowledgement letters? This is where it comes to play. All right, so I'll go ahead and select it just so we can see what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and press save. So it's generating a receipt for us now. Okay, awesome. So now you can see things have changed. Our status is receipted. Awesome. We have a receipt PDF. Perfect. I can open that up. I can preview it and download it if I want. And then of course we have our letter that we generated as well. Same thing, you can go ahead and download that if you wish. Okay. All right, so now there are definitely other ways to filter out transactions that have or haven't been receipted, which we're about to dive into. But I just thought it was important to provide a recap on how receipts are generated and how you can check on the receipt status. So now we'll go ahead and take a look at the receiting process that will really depend on your organization's scenario. Okay, so the following scenarios that I'm going to present are going to guide you in which method in Keela might be ideal for you when generating receipts and letters. So as I run through these, try to identify which scenario or scenarios are relevant to your organization. So as I go through these scenarios, feel free to add which number scenario, there's going to be 4, that's the most relevant to your organization. You can add it into the chat. And you might relate to more than one, and that's totally fine. This will just help you keep track of your scenario when I run through them in Keela if you note them down. But it also gives our Keela team a good idea of what organizations are mostly focused on during receding season, so we can continue to build out more relevant resources for you, right? Okay, so let's run through them. Scenario 1, there are certain transactions that I do not want to create a receipt for. Scenario 2, I have several unreceipted transactions that I want to generate receipts for in bulk. Scenario 3, there are only a few donors that I need to generate single and/or cumulative receipts for. And scenario 4, I have existing transactions that have already been receipted and I want to download and send those receipts to donors. Okay, so keep your scenario in mind. Feel free to throw it into chat. And we're going to jump into Keela and I'll show you which tools can help you depending on the scenario that's relevant to you. Okay, so we're going to start with scenario 1. So scenario 1, there are certain transactions that I do not want to create a receipt for. Okay, so there definitely may be transactions you don't want to create a receipt for. Maybe they were already receipted or the donor doesn't want a receipt at all. Whichever the case, you'll need to tell Keela to ignore them. So ignored status tells Keela that you do not want to create a receipt for these transactions, and users on the account will be prevented from issuing a receipt for them. If you have several that you want to ignore, we recommend heading to the bulk receding tool. You can also ignore transactions via like an individual transaction profile, or by specifying that a transaction has already been receipted if and when you're importing transactions. So there's a few ways to do this, but I find the bulk receding tool to be pretty helpful. So we'll take a look at that. So we're heading to fundraising. Under the receipts tab, this is our bulk receding tool, okay? And we're gonna head right to unreceipted transactions. Now this particular list is showing us every single unreceipted transaction in the account. Unless, of course, it's been ignored, it will not be on this list because we already told Keela we wanted to ignore it. But let's say I'm an organization and I had a summer event, a summer gala, and I know that we issued receipts by hand at that gala and handed them right to the donor on the spot. So I know that I do not want to create a duplicate receipt for these particular transactions. Luckily, I imported those transactions from the event with a source, Summer Gala. So I've made that identification on the transaction. That's going to be helpful here because what I can do then is use my filters. So I'm going to press filters. I'm looking for transactions based on a particular source. And now I'm going to identify the name of the source contains any of Summer Gala. And I'll go ahead and press filter. So I see I have 2 transactions listed here from the Summer Gala that I don't want receipted. So I can either press select this page, select all pages, or I can select them individually. It depends on how many you have. And then I'd press actions and I'm going to mark them as ignored. All right. So when I click that, it says, are you sure? Because Keela likes to ask, are you sure? And so I'm going to go ahead and press confirm. And they disappear, right? So now they're no longer under the unreceded transactions because we've identified the status of these particular transactions as not to be receded. All right. Okay. So let's move into scenario number 2. Also, I wanted to mention that you can always unignore transactions. So if for whatever reason you ignore transactions by accident, I could go find these transactions in fundraising transactions. I would just use my same filters that I used before with the summer gala, and I would select them, actions, unignore. Okay, so that's one way to unignore transactions. So don't worry, you're not stuck if it happens by accident. Okay, scenario 2. I have several unreceded transactions that I want to generate receipts for in bulk. Okay, so this is a pretty common use case. If you have several unreceded transactions, we definitely recommend using our bulk receding tool. That's what it's designed for. So we're going to jump back to it. If those of you remember where we were here under the receipts tab. Okay, so we have a few different subtabs here. We have unreceded transactions. This is going to show any transaction in the receipt, any transaction that hasn't been receded. So if a receipt has already been generated for a transaction, it's not going to show up here. So those transactions that come through forms, you might not see them here because forms automatically generate receipts. Okay. So what happens is we approve these transactions, meaning I'm ready to receipt these, send them through. So they'll move into the approved transactions tab. Okay. And then once they're there, I can actually receipt them. So choose my receipt settings, and then they'll end up in a receipt group, which just means a chunk of receipted transactions. So let's move through this process together. So unreceded transactions, here they are. Same thing, you can use filters. So maybe you want to only receipt a certain group, like maybe, I don't know, your Facebook donations or for a certain event or a certain amount, whatever it may be. You can narrow this list down as much as you want. You can also look at the current year or the previous year. Those are your options. Okay. And then once you're ready to go, let's say Angelica, Pickles, and Willy Wonka. I'm ready to issue their receipts for their transactions. Or I could select this entire page or select all the pages depending on your use case. An actions button is going to appear. When I click actions, I'm going to go ahead and approve them for bulk receipting, which just tells Keela, I'm ready to receipt them. Are you sure? I'm sure. Okay, so you'll notice they disappeared. Where did they go? Well, they went into the approved transactions subtab. Okay, so let's jump here, and there they are. We found them. All right, so it's not over yet. We have another step. So same thing, I am ready to receipt these transactions. So I can either select this page, all pages, or single select actions button, but we have a different option now. This time we're actually going to issue the receipts from the selection. So I'm going to go ahead and press issue receipts from selection. We can have a particular group name for the receipt. So I don't know, maybe it's 2021, or maybe they're specific donors, whatever it may be. This is for internal use. Delivery method. So do you want these transactions receipted and that receipt be delivered via email? Do you want to print and mail them? Or none? You just want that PDF of the receipt generated, but you're not ready to choose sending options. That's okay too. All right, so let's say we choose email. And you can choose the receipt format for money transactions. So that just means, do you want one receipt per donation? So for every transaction, they get a receipt. Or do you want a cumulative receipt for every single donor, meaning all the transactions that are unreceipted for that particular donor will fall under one receipt. This tends to be the most popular option, as donors usually prefer to have all their transactions receipted on one piece of paper rather than 12, right? But it depends on the use case, as always. And then this is the setting for non-money transactions like in-kind donations, for example. So we'll go ahead and press next. Now, you might get this pop-up and be like, what's happening? So it says one transaction does not have the required information to continue. So remember how we talked about earlier that donation receipts require certain information? Well, in this case, Keela is saying, hey, wait a second, you need to add some missing information before we can do this. So I can either choose to add the missing information on the spot or skip and send to the remaining contacts that do have the applicable information. So if I press add missing information, it's going to pull up that contact automatically where it's missing. And I can see off from the jump, there's no full address or email address for this particular contact. So maybe I'm going to use, some sort of like white pages or something to find their address, or maybe I have their phone number and I can reach out to them. I can also see I need an email address. Okay, there we go. And then once I enter that information, I can press next and the contact was updated successfully. Awesome. So you might have a few of those to go through. That's okay. It's normal. Not everybody has full contact information in their database always, right? It's a good opportunity to add it. So this page is just confirming all of the details that we chose. So I can see, everyone who's being receded, and it reiterates the settings we chose. Okay. So I'll go ahead and process it. And it says it'll send me a little notification. So that would show up under the bell icon. All right. But in this case, I'll go right to receipt groups. And there we are, 2021. There's our receipt group. All right. Now, if I click on this receipt group, it reiterates my settings that I chose. All right. I can see all of the receipts has been generated for these particular transactions. Status is delivered, meaning it was sent via email, right? And I have an option to download all. So this is pretty cool. You can actually download all these receipts to save them maybe internally, right? If that's what you choose to do. Same thing with any of the other settings, like instead of via email, if you said print and mail, or I only want PDFs, you can download them as well. Okay, so that is the bulk receding tool in a nutshell. Okay, so let's move to scenario 3. There are only a few donors that I need to generate a single and or cumulative receipt for. So if you only need to generate a receipt for, one or a few donors, you can do this right from their contact profile. So let's choose a contact here. Let's go with Tommy Pickles. And let's go to Tommy's transactions. Okay, so I can see we have 3 transactions here. Let's say we really need to receipt Tommy. Keeps asking us, we got to get this done. So let's say I want to create a cumulative receipt. In this particular case, it won't be possible. Only because you can see that these transactions are from different years, and cumulative receipts require that the transactions are from the same calendar year. So for 2021, we can create a cumulative receipt, but we'll have to create an individual one for 2020. Right? But ideally, you'd already have your 2020 transactions receipted from last year, but I just wanted to show you this particular case. So let's say we select these 2. You'll notice an action button pops up, and we can generate a cumulative receipt. Okay, and we've seen this prompt before, right? It's just asking us for information. And it's asking us a delivery option where you can choose, same thing. All right, we'll go ahead and press save. Okay, it was generated successfully. So now you can see that a receipt was created for both of these transactions. These are not 2 separate receipts. It's the same receipt. You can tell by the receipt serial number, okay? It has a 55 at the end of both. We just put the receipt on both transactions. So that way, if you go into that individual transaction, you always have super quick access to the receipt that that particular transaction is on, okay? And then you can do the same thing, but if you want to do like a single receipt, then in that particular case, we'd probably jump into this receipt and we'd go ahead and create a receipt like we've seen earlier. All right. So let's jump to the last use case. This is, I have existing transactions that have already been receipted and I want to download and send the receipts to donors. So you might already have existing transactions that have been receipted, whether these were transactions from a form, when it's automatically generated, or maybe your team created receipts manually for certain transactions. In either case, if they have already been receipted, you can download them in bulk and then choose to send them to your donors. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We're going to head to fundraising and we're going to head to transactions. Okay, so this is going to be a list of all of my transactions. And now we can use filters. So this is where you want to break down your list, like what transactions that have been receded do you want to download? So if we press filter, probably the best filter to start with is I want to see fundraising transactions that have a receipt issued. So I'm going to use has a receipt issued filter is filled, which just means, yes, this transaction has a receipt. All right. Because again, you'll only be able to download receipts for transactions that have a receipt. And then I can break it down even further. Maybe I have a contact that reached out saying, hey, I know you sent me donation receipts throughout the year, but can you please just make it easy for me and send them all in one email? So then we could go contact, we could go full name, and maybe Ellen called us. Okay. So what this is going to do is pull all of Ellen's transactions that have been receded. Now you can make these filters, you can get as creative as you want with the filters depending on what you want to download. This is just one particular case. Okay, cool. So here's all of Ellen's transactions, all right, that have all been receded. So what I can do is I can select this page, all pages, or single select, as we've seen earlier throughout the app, actions, and then I can download the receipts as a zip file. Okay, so if I go ahead and click on that, what you're going to see is this little module pop up where you'll be able to download the zip files or download them from here. If you're downloading like tons and tons of receipts, like hundreds and hundreds, you might get more than one zip file show up here, which is totally normal. It's just the capacity of zip files, right? If you're downloading like, thousands of them. So just keep that in mind too. Okay. So we've been through all 4 use cases. Of course, we can try to help you with any other use case you have. Our support team is awesome and we're super creative. So happy to help you if you have one that sits outside of those 4. We just tried to pull the main 4. Okay, so now let's head to end of year summaries. I'm super excited about this. I know Elsie and the rest of our whole team is. It's a long anticipated feature. So we're going to look at end of year summaries. First, let me explain what they are, right? For those of you who don't know. So year-end summaries are a 1-page letter that remind your donors of their cumulative giving made over the past year. This is a terrific opportunity to acknowledge your donors' contributions and really thank them for their support. So on the slide, you'll see a very simplified example of the content of an end of year summary. They generally have like an intro to what the content of the email or letter is, an outline of the yearly giving, and of course, a thank you. In this particular example where it says, serve those in need underlined, I added a quick link to the organization's impact stories page on their website as a way to allow donors to see the impact of their contributions. Okay, but if you do something like this, just make sure to keep it super, super simple to avoid distracting from the main purpose of the letter, which is, thank you, here's what you've contributed for the year. So how can you send end of year summaries using Keela? Well, our developers have been working really nonstop to enhance our eBlast tool. So once they do this, the eBlast tool will include a donation summary template. So luckily, for those of you who joined us today, we're going to give you a little sneak peek of what we might expect this to look like. Now, keep in mind it might change, right? Because we're still building, but generally this is going to be the format. So we're aiming to release this feature by the end of this year, assuming all the testing goes as planned, because in this virtual world, I know we all know how technology goes, so, but fingers crossed. Okay, so now let's take a look at a few screenshots of the highly anticipated feature. Okay, so here, you'll see that the eBlast tool on the left-hand sidebar has been renamed Communications. All right, now if we look at the tabs across the top, we see that it now encompasses an email marketing tool. So this is where your eBlasts are going to live. But we also have a direct mail tool. So this is a new addition. This is where our brand new direct mailing letter tool is going to live, right? Now, we have also introduced that donation summary mail type. This will be available in both eBlasts as well as the direct mail tool. So in this particular example that you're looking at, you can see end of year summaries 2021. This is the first on the list. So let's assume we went ahead and clicked on this direct mail letter that was created. Okay, so we're going to be directed to the letter's overview and content tabs. You can see it across the top. This is what we're used to with our eBlast tool, right? Keep in mind that like although we're looking at a direct mail type right now in this example, the layout's going to look pretty similar in eBlast as well. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can see under the direct mail type in this case that the donation summary type is selected. Okay, so now we're going to look at what it looks like to edit the content of this particular letter template. Here you'll see that in the edit window to the left, a brief snippet of what the letter might look like, okay? On the right side, you can see you can toggle on donation summary and choose which time period that donations fell in that you want represented in the summary. You have the options of end of year, the year to date, or custom date. You'll then also see below some of the more customizable options for the summary, like whether you want to display the gift type, the amount, the description, the impact area, and even campaign. You'll have the chance to play around with this feature once it's released, so hang in there. I promise it's on the way. And you can stay tuned for updates via our What's New announcements, which can be found in-app by clicking on that little bell icon in the top right of your Keela screen. I know Elsie also loves to put the updates in our newsletter, so I'm sure she'll throw it in there as well. Okay, so once you generate and send your receipts and letters, your end of year summaries, it's time to reflect on the year. This way you can evaluate the goals you'd set for yourself at the beginning of the year and start thinking strategically about next year's goals. So like here are a few ways to report and reflect on your data while making predictions and setting goals for the year to come. So we're gonna look at the following tools in Keela. We're gonna go over fundraising goals, KPIs, forecasting, and reporting, okay? So let's jump into Keela. First things first, we're gonna head to the fundraising summary tab. Okay, so let's look at goals for the start. So we have donation goals and we have revenue goals. These are internal, so you would have had to set these goals in the beginning of the year. And you can choose between monthly, quarterly, or yearly. You can display whichever goals that you want. All right, you can do it later too. Even if you didn't do it in the beginning of the year, you can still set it up now and this will automatically populate with your progress. So this is a great thing to look at, to think about, have you met your goals? If you did, great. So think about what your organization did to help you get there. If you didn't perform so well, perhaps you set your goal too high, or maybe you had campaigns that didn't do so great. So use this as a brainstorming activity with your team to determine where you really nailed it and where you might need to aim to improve a little bit next year. Okay, so now let's take a look, scrolling down at key performance indicators. This is one of my favorite tools in Keela. So key performance indicators for context are figures, numbers, percentages, calculations that measure your organization's current standing or progress over a period of time. They're usually used to indicate the effectiveness of your organization compared to the goals that you set or other benchmarks from the industry overall. Okay, so just for reference, Keela has 3 KPI categories. So if I click Manage KPIs, you'll see there's 3 categories here. One is donors. So this is going to look at metrics related to your contacts and donor base, like contact list size, contact list growth rate, contacts acquired, so on and so forth. And we have little descriptions of each one as well to guide you. You can remove them from the dashboard that's sitting behind this module or add new ones. You can play around as much as you want. Then we have fundraising KPIs. These are more related to gifts, okay, or like transactions. So you can see medium gift size, percentage of gifts from online donations, recurring donation growth rate. And then we have email marketing or eBlast stats, like your ongoing open rate or click rate, so on and so forth, right? So you can add them, build your own little custom dashboard. You'll see that each little summary here shows you your current metric, the benchmark, okay? This looks at other organizations who have the same area of impact and suggests a benchmark for you. You can also set your own goals by editing the goal. All right. And then if you press more on any of the KPIs, you're going to get a little bit more details about this particular KPI, like your current standing, last month, the change that occurred, a benchmark where it's relevant. You'll see how this has changed, okay, throughout the year. And this is pretty cool. We have little infographics. So what is it? So Keela tells you, if you're like, I don't even know what this indicator is, like, what am I even looking at? Well, we tell you, what is it? Why does it matter? Or why should I even care? And how to use it, right? Because it's one thing to look at a metric and be like, oh, we're doing well, or oh, we're not doing so well. But okay, so what are you going to do about it? Even if you're doing well, it doesn't stop there, right? You have to sustain it. So we give you a little bit of information on what you can do with that particular KPI. And if you didn't set this up in the beginning of this past year, it's definitely okay. You can add these KPIs at any time, and they're going to populate with your organization's information. Okay, so then you can start using it moving forward by checking it more consistently to make sure you're going the direction you want to go. But you can always add them at the end of the year, this year, and check it out. Okay, now we are going to look at, let me scroll up a little bit, the fundraising report. So this is also pretty cool. A fundraising report, this is like a pre-populated report that has information, insights, data visualizations that break down your year of fundraising. Really, the purpose is to support your organization in analyzing the health of your fundraising program, identify areas of opportunity for better donor stewardship, and really understand which strategies work best for your donors' preferences. So when you click on this, it'll go ahead and download, and it'll show up here in the notifications. And then you can download it right from here. And just to give you a little preview, okay, you can see the data visualizations here, like this one's looking at total donation history, quarterly donations over the year, impact areas and funding related to that, top performing campaigns. So it's pretty cool. This is great. I know as a board member myself, I'd love to see this for the organization I work for. I know the internal staff also like it because it can be really motivating, right? So definitely recommend downloading that and checking it out. Okay, so now we'll just look really quickly at the forecasting tool. So if I click on forecasting, you see a little graph. Some of you might have jumped in here and be like, I wonder what this is, or maybe some of you use it, and that's even better because it's really such a great tool. So this particular graph shows you the cumulative donations received throughout the year, and you can see predictions of what to expect moving forward. So how does Keela predict what you can expect in terms of donations and in the future? So what we do is look at your donation history from the past and base our predictions on that. However, we do know that some donors might drop off, you might gain more donors, and donors might increase or decrease their giving amounts. So to account for this, we added some toggle bars. We have churn rate. So maybe if you're trying to hit a certain like income goal, you can see how many donors you can afford to maybe drop off to still maintain that goal. Maybe you look and you're like, oh goodness, we can only afford to lose 6 donors. We better step it up with donor stewardship, right? Same here, you can adjust to see an increase or decrease in what you expect your single donations to be. Maybe you're looking at one of your KPIs for how much your gift size is increasing or decreasing. You can pull that metric into here, right? And then it's going to be even more accurate because we're basing it on your KPI metric, which is real data, right? And then you can make some adjustments here for transaction type. Maybe you don't want to see all donations, but just single or recurring. And then you can also choose a time period. Okay, and one last thing I want to show you is that, of course, there is the reporting tool for annual reporting. Good news, exciting. We've totally revamped our reporting tool. It's not even released yet. We're hoping the beginning of this week. So you guys are lucky in that you get another sneak peek of something that's coming out, okay? So I'm going to jump into a different account here just to show you what that looks like. All right, so now if I jump into reports, rather than seeing a list of reports, you're going to see a list of dashboards, okay? I'm gonna give this a second. Let's hope it loads. They might be in the middle of working on it, so let's hope for the best. Let me try to refresh it. There we go, perfect. Okay, so normally you'd see a list of reports here, but in this case, they're considered dashboards. Now what that means is the dashboard is going to show like a bunch of different widgets. Think of them as mini reports. So it's taking the information that you chose that you want to look at, like contacts, and has little widgets or mini reports that break all that data down. If you create a dashboard, you can either choose one click, right? So this is where Keela really does the filtering for you and suggests reports for you that might be useful, right? or you can create a custom one. So the filters that you choose and those little widgets or mini reports that you choose, you're customizing everything from scratch. This is going to make a lot more sense once I pull one up, okay? So let's say I'm going to do a one-click report because I want Keela to do all the work for me. And I choose all contacts and their transactions. That's what I want to look at. So I'm going to press next. Okay. So now I have all these different widgets that break down all contacts and their transactions. All right. So you have like fundraising transactions over time with, you know, data visualizations, distribution of transaction amounts. It's really endless. Like, this is a wild tool. I think it's amazing. In terms of widgets, there's a few options. So if you want to filter the entire data set, meaning all contacts and their transactions, like the year, for example, I could say, I only want to look at fundraising transactions where the date was received is relatively this year or last year if you're doing this in January, right? So filter, now what it's going to do is update all of these widgets to meet that criteria. Even cooler is you can get even more customization by filtering the specific widget. So I could break down this particular widget even more by adding filters just to this. Okay, so you can see how you can really pinpoint exactly what you're looking for. You can customize just that data visualization a little bit. And then of course you can rename, you can remove widgets, you can add widgets. Okay, so now you can see how we have all these different widget categories that you can jump in and look at. You can add or remove widgets. Okay, so when this comes out, I definitely recommend playing around. I think it's going to be amazing. And of course, our support team is going to release tons of resources to help you walk through this. We're working on them now, and we're always there if you have any questions to help you work through it, but definitely something to be excited about. Okay. So we've pretty much covered nearly everything you'll want to consider as we get closer to the end of the year, and I've shown you how you can use Keela's tools to help you accomplish these tasks. So before moving into Q&A, I just want to let everyone know that if anyone has any questions related to today's webinar or your unique end of year tasks and use cases, always feel free to reach out to support@keela.com, where one of our Keela experts will collaborate with you to make sure we help you figure things out. And for those of you on our premium care support subscription, I wanted to let you know that we just released an end of year workshop where I'll sit down with you and your team in an interactive session, just us, and we'll make sure we run through the end of year checklist together and set you up for success going into the new year. And for those of you just hearing about premium care for the first time, premium care is a more advanced and personalized support option. And this includes access to live chat right from your Keela account, phone support, live product training, and interactive best practice workshops like the end of year one. And guess what? We're actually running a 50% off promo for premium care until the end of November. All right, so I'll have Elsie add a link to the chat with details of premium care and the promotion. And we'll also add the resources to our post-webinar email. So with that said, Elsie, you're welcome to come back and join us, and we'll move into Q&A.
Sure thing. I crept up and was a little bit early, so I just had to sort of slink off back into the chat.
It's okay. It made me smile inside. I was like,
I hope so.
Elsie's still here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Maggie. That was amazing. And we had some really brilliant questions while you were running through. A lot of them were sort of just text-based. So at the moment, I only have one question for you so far to demonstrate live.
Okay.
And it is, how do we include a donation tracker bar on our donation form?
Oh, great question. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is create a campaign, okay? Because that progress bar is actually coming from a campaign goal that you set. So when you go ahead and create a campaign, you set a campaign fundraising goal, all right? So let's just say I do webinar, and let's say my fundraising goal is 4,000. Okay, so then when I go to a form, and it has to be a donation form, right? You can edit it. Okay, so we'll go to setup and we'll edit it. And what we're going to do is link it to that campaign that we just created. Because now it's going to pull that fundraising goal into the form. And then if we jump to designer, you see the campaign section here. It adds a campaign content section, or if we edit it, we can display a campaign progress bar and details about the campaign. Okay, and then you'll see the progress bar pop up there.
Beautiful. Okay, that was the only one. Let me just put done. That was for Darlene. Wonderful. That's been answered. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any more. There were quite I think probably the most questions I've received in any webinar chat. So you were obviously very inspiring as you were going through all those sections. People were thinking, oh, yep, brilliant. So that's fantastic. Oh, Darlene, anything you can say about the automation tool?
Great question, Darlene. So the automation tool is awesome. It can automate just about any type of process. So it's like, let's say you have contacts that are added to the account. You can send them a whole series of a welcome email. Or maybe you have donors that donate a certain amount, or they're brand new donors, and you can send them through a journey. So one of my favorite things that I've received as a donor is somebody, like, I donate, right? And then it takes me through over the course of like 2 months where my donation went. I knew every step of the journey as a donor and where it went. So that's another thing you can set up with automation. But it goes beyond just sending emails. Like, you can also set it up so that your particular teammates are notified when you have to do something. So maybe you're setting up a volunteer interest automation where people fill out a volunteer interest form. And then my teammates are notified that we have to look into their application. We can send out applications. We can add to-dos to contacts, add or remove tags from contacts. So it's pretty expansive depending on your particular use case. But you can always share with us what you're hoping to do, and we can walk you through what that would look like.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maggie. I've got one here for if donation receipts settings are set to create a cumulative receipt. So when the donation was created, if cumulative receipt option was chosen, what do we need to do at the end of the year to process or email or print these out?
So that's a great question. If the cumulative receipt setting is chosen, you'll see that the receipt status is scheduled. That's a great question because it wasn't in like the statuses that we talked about. But yeah, if you go to the transaction, it'll say scheduled, and then we automatically send them at the end of the year for you. So you actually don't have to do anything related to that.
Perfect. Beautiful. And next one I've got is for Eric. And I think I know the answer to this one, but you might as well, Maggie. So stop me if I'm jumping in.
Take it away.
On the end of year summaries, will we be able to access volunteer details and summaries? So at the moment, these are for donations only, but we're hoping to expand this in the future to include volunteer hours and revenue payments as well. So stay tuned for that. The first iteration will be donation summaries. Oh, we've got one from Som. Would it be possible to get step-by-step instructions of what we went through today? I would like to keep for my own reference. So you'll get a copy of the call today, as well as a lot of like articles that refer to stuff that Maggie sent out. Maggie, is there anything else we're going to be including in the email that can help with this?
Let me think about it. Maybe I can put something together and get something out to everyone. I think that's a great idea. We can also share the slide deck and things like that.
That's the one. 100%. And like
yeah,
Maggie
PDF
said,
of the slides, right, Darlene? Thank you.
If you'd like to have a workshop of this with Maggie, we're having a 50% off premium care subscription at the moment. So with premium care, you get phone support, scheduled phone support, a monthly training session, and a workshop. And you can run a workshop with the expert herself, Maggie, right now. So I'll include more details on that in our follow-up email as well, but I've also put a link in the chat up above.
It looks like Jeff has a raised hand.
Oh, we've got some more questions coming through as well. Sorry. Okay. Will our old reports still be available in the new reporting feature? Yes, they definitely will. They'll carry over. Next one. I'm just working on downloading all of my donations now as I'm just getting started. Can I send receipts to some or all of those donations?
So there's donations that are just coming in and they want to, sorry, Elsa.
It sounds like it perhaps, and Margaret, please feel free to pop any clarifying questions in the chat. But from what I can see, downloading all my donations now as I'm just getting started. So perhaps Margaret is downloading her donations from another system so that she can put it into the Keela system. Yes, that's right. So if Margaret imports all of her donations from her previous system into Keela, will they be able to send receipts for some or all of those donations?
Okay, great question. So in that case, it sounds like those transactions have already been receded. So in that case, you probably wouldn't want to generate receipts in Keela because then you'll have duplicate transaction receipts, which isn't actually compliant, right? So what you can do is when you import those transactions that have been receded, you can specify in your import under is receded why, yes, which we have in our knowledge-based resources for reference. And then Keela will automatically ignore them. So the system knows not to issue a duplicate receipt for them. So it would be best practice not to re-receipt them.
Absolutely. And if they haven't received a receipt, of course, you can use the bulk receipting tool that Maggie demonstrated as well. So both options are covered.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got one from Janet. I'm new to Keela. Can I create donor stewardship pipelines without the automation feature? Would I use tags and do this manually?
So yeah, this would be a manual process. You could send e-blasts and you can schedule them, right? So you can at least schedule them a little bit in advance, but then you would create an e-blast and send it, close to every time that you wanted to send out, rather than having it as a drip where you set it up and then you just let Keela do all the work from there. But yeah, you can send the e-blast using like segments or tags, so you can really, put that list of contacts together and send the e-blast to only who it's relevant to, for sure.
Absolutely. Next question. Can you send cumulative receipts and every time receipts? So I think every time receipts might be a single receipt for every donation. So can we do a mix for recurring donors? Can we choose to have some receive a receipt every single time they make a donation? And for others, can we choose to have cumulative? And yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, you can. So if you go to, oh, I guess I'm not sharing my screen anymore. When I answered that campaign progress bar question, was I sharing?
Yeah, you definitely were.
Okay, good. I was like, oh my goodness. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but I'm still sharing my screen, right? Okay. So what you could do is go to fundraising scheduled recurring, and you can pull up the recurring donation where you can see the receipt setting. Okay. And if you want to edit it, you can change the receipt setting from here and update it. Okay, and then of course in the bulk receipting tool, like we saw, you can take certain groups of people and give them single receipts and take a separate group and cumulative receipt them. So you have a lot of options with that.
Absolutely. So again, I'll pop this link into the chat because I've had a lot of people mention in the chat that they might want to sign up for that premium care promotion. So just check that link because it has all the details about the promotion itself and what you need to do and we need to know to take advantage of it, because you will need to reach out to us before purchasing and we'll apply the coupon and figure that all out. For anybody who's interested in automation, we mentioned it a couple of times. Since this webinar has been all about sneak peeks, I may as well just give you all a sneak peek. Keep an eye out for a certain little promotion that we might be running next month for automation. While this month we're doing 50% off premium care, perhaps there may be some kind of similar promotion for automation next month. I don't know, maybe.
You all are getting so spoiled. There's very few webinars where we like give all these sneak peeks and stuff. So it was a good one to come to.
Absolutely. If you're going to come to one, this is the one to do it.
It is.
All right. Now we are running a little bit over, so I'm going to call it there. But if anybody has any other questions, send them through to support@keela.com and we'll include them. And of course, if you have any suggestions or ideas about care labs that you would like to see, please let us know. We're always open for ideas. But thank you, everyone. You're going to be getting a recording and lots of goodies. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming along, Maggie. Bye.
Bye.